Welcome to Eden Equips, the podcast that shares real stories, practical tools to help parents, carers, educators feel equipped in the journey of raising and supporting neurodivergent children and young people. Whether you are tuning in today with a coffee, whether you're in the car, during a very rare quiet moment in your life, I am so glad you are here. And today we're joined by Leigh. Leigh, it's so nice to have you. Leigh is an incredibly experienced individual whose story and wisdom I know you're going to just be delighted to hear today if you're listening. Leigh is a speech and language therapist, one of the founders and directors at Insight Clinic. Been a speech and language therapist for almost 15 years, over 9 years experience as within autism assessment. We've got lots here we can unpick and talk about. Leigh, I'm so glad you're with us today. Thanks for coming and thanks for joining us. I feel like this is sometimes the vaguest of questions to ask people, but yeah, tell us a wee bit about yourself, what you do, who you are.
Okay.
Go for it.
So I am Leigh. I am a speech and language therapist and more recently a sensory integration practitioner.
Yes, I've seen that. Yeah, I love that. I'd love to hear about that.
So I am one of the co-founders of Insight Clinic, along with Jade, who was on your podcast a couple of weeks ago.
Listen if you haven't, guys. Yeah, great podcast.
So predominantly at the minute, I'm really involved in autism assessment, ADHD assessment, and a little bit of training and support around that. I'm not really practicing speech and language therapy as much at the minute, and just trying to incorporate sort of the sensory integration within a lot of what we do at Insight Clinic.
Amazing. Tell me what that is, because people will be listening to that word sensory integration and they'll go, right, I've heard both those words individually, but what does that mean together? Like, what is it?
I suppose really it's about how your sensory system and your nervous system feels regulated. So thinking about that fight or flight reaction that you might have in certain situations. And it's, for me and you, it might be, if you get in your car and you've had a really busy day, you have to turn the radio down or you have to turn the radio off because you're just feeling a bit overwhelmed and you need to take away some of that sensory experience. So for our young people, especially neurodivergent young people, and their sensory systems can become much more dysregulated. They might process sensory information differently. So it's just working around strategies and environmental changes that can support them.
Really. And also giving, is that looking like giving really practical approaches of for families, but also for individuals to be like, here's how you can also support your brain in these moments.
And lots of people will do it quite naturally. Lots of children will know in this classroom I'm going to wear my ear defenders. It doesn't always have to be a major difference or change, but for some young people it might actually be a block of therapy will help, or excuse me, sorry, I have been sick, so I have a bit of a crooked throat.
Good, don't worry.
Or for some young people who maybe have lots of differences around eating, a block of therapy or intervention around textures and tastes and eating might be helpful. It's a
really big thing, isn't it? And a really challenging thing, I think, for families. Scary, can be really scary in that moment. So really good to know there's help and conversations out there with that. I love that idea of so many individuals and young people will do it subconsciously of but actually being able for teaching and helping brains. I think all brains, isn't it? Helping all brains understand, our little ones understand that this is what my brain needs right now, or what it absolutely doesn't need. Or what do I do in this moment because I'm feeling a little bit with our little one, that little bit stumpy we're using at the minute, if things are feeling a bit stumpy, and how do we support in terms of what do you do then? That's a really beautiful way to teach all young people, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think adults talking about it as well is really important because we don't always say it out loud, but my little boy has quite sensitive eyes, so he was at the optician's recently and he was able to say to the optician, I don't like it, that light is too bright for my eyes, it's making them water.
You were brilliant.
And then he had an absolute meltdown because he had to get eye drops, but it was
but again, isn't that thing of being able just to voice it, name it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can hear it more and more in adults. And I think sometimes when you're in this field for a long time, you hear yourself and you're that's so important, because I use that now. I've been I actually can't, I'm massively dysregulated right now. I need to X, Y, Z. I remember in teaching, doing that so much and being I remember a situation happening. And then our principal was can you call that parent right now? And I was no, because I was I'm so dysregulated and furious about what's just happened. You put me on the phone, I will say things I shouldn't say.
Yeah.
And actually just being able to voice that and be I need to go and have 5 minutes because I feel I don't feel okay.
And
in my
same
body.
for young people in school. So if they're dysregulated in school and then you're expecting them to stand up and do an assembly or go into an exam, you know, that is not really going to be that successful for that young person. And then they're going to have negative connotations associated with that. There's a lot of talk at the minute actually about sensory rooms.
Yeah.
And that really we kind of want to move away from that idea of a room that somebody goes to on their own, you know, when things have already past breaking point potentially. And what we really want to work towards is maybe more sensory spaces where it's available for everybody to use as and when they need in the environment that they're already in.
And isn't that the whole key point of being like everyone as and when they need, like, rather than, as you said, I think that it's got really blurry at the minute with sensory rooms, vertical comments of being like, oh, that kid's had a meltdown off you to a
Let's
sensory
send
room,
him away.
too late, like, you know,
And
that's
also it feels a bit like exclusion, doesn't it?
well,
It's
it
not
is,
really
isn't it?
including or inclusive.
No, it's not inclusive at all. It's you've done, here's an action, we're now excluding you from this environment to go and sit in a room by yourself.
Yeah.
Funny enough, I'm not going to love that bubble lamp at that moment.
And I suppose that I'm gone off on a whole tangent
come on,
here.
I love it. Let's do it.
The other thing about it is it's great to have the sensory equipment and sensory resources, but you also do need people that understand the sensory systems because there are equipment and resources that can do the opposite of what you might want it to do.
Yeah.
So, for example, you might think a young person doing some spinning on a spinny seat or a swing is going to be really positive for them, but actually that can be really alerting. So if what you're needing to do is bring somebody down a little bit to get them ready for learning, you know, that could possibly be the opposite of what you're going to achieve.
And that's that whole like individualized, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, of like every individual's a human, will respond to things differently. So like, I guess in terms of even if you think about it for yourselves, of like some people might really love like when they're feeling dysregulated, like leave me by myself, like give me a minute. That can dysregulate. I seek people when I feel dysregulated. I think because I grew up in a really big family. Like I didn't really know what it was like to be by myself ever until like I went to university and I was like, this is a horrible feeling. Like, so still to this day, when I'm dysregulated, I need my co-regulator. I need a person that I know, love and trust.
Yes.
Because that's what my brain learned growing up.
And again, that brings up a whole other topic of that co-regulation and parents supporting their young people. You know, that's been in the media a lot recently too, which is really important.
It is, yeah. What does that look like? We're going on this.
Yeah, I know. And actually, you're going to have to cut this because I don't have enough to say about that.
But I think co-regulation, though, in that topic of co-regulation is important. I think what we see is adults feeling that they have to step away rather than like step in and support.
Or it's nearly putting the responsibility on the young person. You know, you're trying to give them strategies to regulate themselves, and actually it's more of a joint process.
Joint regulation, isn't it? And that massively important. I think then looking at some of those key challenges in your work that you see for children and young people, what do you see? What are you seeing at the minute? I kind of, yes, I'd nearly said like around like speech and language, but actually in general in your work, 'cause you're in so many different pockets. Like, what are some of those key challenges at the minute you're seeing?
I think these challenges relate to everyone. I don't think they're specific for children and young people, but I think the demands on our lives at the minute have increased dramatically over the years. You know, I was going to say as a child growing up in the 80s, but that's horrendous. It sounds awful. But, you know, what we expect of children and young people and what we expect of everybody's life and the situations and the environments that they're in, you know, the sensory demands have increased, the social demands have increased. And I think there's also then a misunderstanding of people's responses to those demands. So if somebody has shut down or if somebody presents them with selective communication, people don't always understand why that's happening or what to do about it. And by the time it almost reaches crisis point, then where are the services? You know, the service access points are quite tricky. And I think social media has massive pros and massive cons, and I think for young people the demands on them in terms of social media, recording their lives, fitting a certain expectation of what they should be like and how they should behave and having that put out there for other people to see and comment on, I think that's quite challenging. Yeah,
it's massively challenging for young people too, and I think it's a really important thing to note that the world has changed around young people, and I'm saying this so much recently, and I nearly feel like I sound like a broken record saying it again and again, but like the cohort of our young people have changed.
Very, very much.
Very much, because the world has dramatically changed in the last 10 years. So, you know, the importance of being like, what if you are saying in a conversation, I know, but that's what we've always done. You got to go, red flag. because these kids aren't who they always have been.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing, but you're right. The demands, the pressure, and also the world that they're being raised in is very, very different. So the cohort of children that we're seeing are very different.
Yeah.
And I think we have to set aside our own experiences, because there's nothing more that bugs me than that phrase, back in my day. And I'm like, yeah, well, back in your day, no harm. You had to walk to a phone box to make a phone call, or you had to like wait for the like mind thing of being like, oh, it was the whole you can't make a call and be on the
the
internet at the same time. Like that world is so foreign now. And if you say that to a young person, they're like, oh my gosh, you're so old, because it is so distant to what they know in the world that they live in, where everything's immediate and access. And I think we have to realize that as adults, the world is different. So we've got to approach situations differently for young people, and maybe enter that slightly more empathetically as well for young people.
Yeah, and I think it affects, whenever we're doing autism assessments, because how the assessment modules, if we're using an ADOS assessment with a young person, how you're approaching that assessment now versus what you might have done 15 years ago with a young person is different. Because if I present a 10 or 11-year-old with toys and ask them to come and play with me, they're not always keen, and that's not always because somebody's autistic. It's because at that age they no longer play with toys.
How are you changing that?
Well, we very much just take the lead of the young person, and we sort of work out quite quickly what we think they're going to enjoy and engage with the most, and we'll be very flexible in how we approach the assessment. But it's no longer just as easy to
you have to go back and look at it, don't you, and be like, how have we changed our approach or our system with, as you said, the change in profile of children and young people in general. And I think that stuff at Insight that you're doing, Insight Clinic, is truly incredible work. Like, I love the work that you guys do, and I'd love to hear a wee bit more about like how did that begin? How did it start?
So Jude and I met working in a different company, doing autism assessments. I think actually Jude maybe started just as I went off on maternity leave, and then I returned to maternity leave, and we were working together. Nice. And then I think by 2019 we both decided that we wanted to be self-employed, so we left. And we were working individually, so I had gone back to very much providing a speech and language therapy service, and Jude was providing an educational psychology service. But I guess the children that were coming through our clinics, there was always then the odd child that we were saying, I think this young person is presenting with autistic traits, and the parents might have said, is that something that you can help us with? So in order then to do that for the parent, I would have contacted Jude, because I need that multidisciplinary assessment, and vice versa. She would have done the same.
Lovely. What a good team.
So I think eventually that just brought us together more and more. And then COVID sort of happened in the middle of all this too. And I think COVID changed the profile of, of assessments and referrals.
You're right, yeah, for sure.
So just for handiness, then we decided to get a premises together. But we were still very much working separately, and then probably within another year, I think 2021 or 2022, we realised that actually this was a business in its own right, and in order to provide a well-rounded service for people, it needed to look more like that. So Insight Clinic was born, and my dad actually was the one that helped us come up with the name.
Oh, I love.
So I'll give him a wee shout out.
Yeah, absolutely, because naming that is hard, isn't it?
It is hard, and we didn't want to use specific terms like autism. We definitely want to stay away from things like spectrum, because we know language changes all the time. So we wanted something that was kind of meaningful, that shared what we were trying to do. Yeah. But wasn't kind of putting us in a very small box. Yeah, no, it was that wise. That's very wise. We love that. What in terms of so a lot of stuff in Insight, you're talking about assessment and your diagnosis, and we've chatted about that, and with Jude on that episode we were talking about that shift from labelling to identification, and how beautiful that language is, but it's constantly being questioned. I think I'm feeling that shift at the minute of it's resurfaced its head in our climate, and the comments everyone's getting diagnosed these days, phrases that one of the big research papers coming out about saying oh, a diagnosis is now out of control. That language is so unhelpful, and genuinely even talking about it makes me angry and very frustrated. And I can be right, let's go for this. I guess for you, because you're so in that realm, if you hear that comment, what's your response? And more than that, what's the actual reality behind it? Because sometimes people saying these comments are just people who have opinions for the sake of having an opinion, and actually aren't in it, doing it, or have bothered to actually learn anything about it. So what are your thoughts? Yeah, I mean, We get asked this a lot.
Okay.
We get asked it by people that are approaching our clinic for assessment. We get asked it just in comments. We see it in the social media. I have to try and really take a breath before I answer it because I don't want to become defensive and argumentative. So I have taken some time to kind of pull my thoughts together so that when I answer this question, I can try and answer it with some clarity. Yeah. And I think ultimately, there are not more people who are suddenly neurodivergent. And we are just much better at identifying those people. People are much better at identifying that in themselves. And I suppose some of the reasons that I think that has happened, I think we've already touched on this, lifestyles are completely different. So, how people used to live their life in Ireland, they maybe had a job for life. There was maybe a very consistent household. If it was a 2-parent household, one parent was probably at home, one parent went out to work. People maybe didn't go out every night to after school clubs. They maybe didn't go out to restaurants every weekend. They maybe just went out to church on a Sunday and they met the community that they grew up and they lived with.
And it was consistent and the same.
And you might have had, in fact, when we do assessments, people will say, oh, funny you say that. My great uncle Jimmy used to eat the same dinner every night and, only like to sit in that chair. So that's being very flippant. But, you do see it when you look back in generations. And then I think COVID was another massive change. So we had young people who were maybe hanging on okay in school, then come out of school, had a period of time at home and really struggled to transition back into school. And you had parents spending a lot of time with their children who were maybe noticing things they hadn't noticed before.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Access to services was stopped. So then whenever the world opened again, there was a lot of people in need of support. I have written notes for this one.
No, it's a meaty answer. No, it's an important one.
I think the diagnostic criteria, so although we're trying to move away from that language of diagnosis and things, and it's not wonderful, we don't love it, but we are bound by it as clinicians. But actually that has widened, so the diagnostic criteria now, it's the DSM-5 that we're using, so it was only the DSM-3, which was in the 80s, that actually identified autism as a separate diagnosis for children. So previously children might have been diagnosed with childhood schizophrenia or something really awful.
Like it's wild when you say that, isn't it?
Because it sounds hideous.
It is, and it is hideous, isn't it? That you're like, oh, wait a second, that was... and many people have been listening to this be like, oh, what, the 80s? Oh, okay, that's not actually... I remember XYZ about that. Yeah.
So I think with the development of the DSM criteria, catching is the wrong word, but we're definitely able to identify groups of people that were excluded. And then that has widened further to moving away from that classic presentation of autism to maybe an internalised presentation of autism and things like that.
Yeah, it's really
or autism without learning difficulties.
Yes.
People maybe would have been missed before.
Correct, yeah. It would have.
And then within the last sort of 15 years, social media has become a massive platform for autistic people. And again, I know you and Jude talked about this. But the Actually Autistic, really hashtag, which has been trending, has given a massive platform for people to really advocate for themselves and share the lived experience of autism rather than a professor saying this is what autism is.
100%. And even small little things that I know, talking to one of my friends who's autistic, is my favourite trend at the minute they're saying is the share your favourite fork, if as an autistic individual, this is my favourite, this is my favourite one. I think that's so many people will really kind of understand that, but also they were saying to me, they were like, this really I felt like a sense of freedom for me because I was like, oh my gosh, I have that too, and I think there's beauty in...
Absolutely. And once you start, obviously how algorithms work, so once you kind of start looking at that, then you're getting lots more exposure to those sorts of things and you're really starting to maybe resonate with that.
So there's a lot of positivity in this.
I think it's
only positive. If someone says to you it's out of control or everyone's getting diagnosed, we're like, well, there's not a bad thing in terms of people are being able to identify and understand themselves better. What is the negativity approach to that? But what is someone who is involved in the assessment? How does that feel when someone's like, oh, sure, everyone's getting that diagnosis or it's out of control though? How does that feel for you guys doing the work behind the scenes?
Internally, it's very frustrating, but it gives us an opportunity to try and share better information.
And it's not necessarily that everybody is. I think that's
absolutely not. Now because we predominantly offer a private service. We do work with people before they actually come into the clinic for assessment.
Right. So this is really important. Yes.
Yeah. We're not going to put somebody on a pathway that is maybe not the right one for them. So we will do quite in-depth triage. If we don't feel like we have enough information to proceed, we'll talk to the family about that. We'll ask them for more.
Yeah.
So definitely not everybody that comes for a referral gets an assessment.
Okay, and I think that's important because I think for some reason I think people are thinking that this is like, especially with private practices, that it's like I send you a DM and you're like, yeah, no bother, here's the diagnosis. Thanks
Yeah,
for
definitely
contacting
not.
us. Like, here's the money, here's the diagnosis.
Definitely not.
Bye. Like that's not what
and
it is at
even then,
all.
so not everybody who wants a referral will come for an assessment, but then not everybody that comes for an assessment will come out with a diagnosis either. We do have guidelines that we have to work to, and
you
it's
take it
really
very
important that we do
seriously.
that. Yeah.
And I think that is what I want people to hear, is that it is done with the utmost care, respect, love, with the best interest of the person at heart. But also, as you said, there's guidelines that actually do have to be followed and taken. And it's not that you're coming in being like, you get the diagnosis, you get a no, it does. It feels like, I think the world thinks it is like that.
Yeah, I think there are some people that think it is like that.
Yeah. And I think that's what we have to then come back to, of being like, some, not all, and actually being like, here's the truth behind it. And as you said, I love that, of like okay, here's how I can actually really help in this space, and be like, well, let me tell you something about this. Let me actually teach you what this actually does look like. I guess even just coming in to land a little bit, focus on hope amongst the challenges. So there's lots of noise about diagnosis. There's lots of negativity about it. We've talked about how that can be very positive. Well, how do you, I guess, in your work, or what have you experienced that keeps you hopeful?
So last night I was looking on Facebook, it's a group for parents that I'm part of because I am a parent as well. And somebody had asked the question about their young child that they felt was showing traits of autism and ADHD, but they felt that if they were neurodivergent, it was probably relatively low support needs. And they were saying, is there any point in going for an assessment?
Okay.
So I had kind of prepared myself for the comments that were going to be like, don't
You're like
your
this,
child.
fingers at the ready.
I was almost not going to read it because I'd had quite a stressy day yesterday anyway. I don't need any more rage. But I decided to read them anyway. And there were 20 comments on it at the point that I read it. And every single comment was people saying, go for an assessment.
Come on, yeah.
So some were parents of neurodivergent children, some were neurodivergent adults, and they were all saying, like, you need to know, your child needs to know, you need to be able to empower them, support their mental health, make sure the people that need to know have the right information about your child. And that I was so happy.
Like relieved, isn't it?
Yeah, like I was so relieved and so happy.
And that gives you hope, doesn't it?
Very
much. Cling on to that, of be like, okay, even let's say 5 years ago, this comment section would look pretty different.
I mean, even like 3 weeks ago,
3 weeks,
it could have looked different. I mean, it just really depends on the day. But for there to have been no comments that were like at all negative,
a majority sharing, like this is what keeps us hopeful, with helping identification.
Very much.
Okay, quick equip time. Our game of closing, rapid fire, that we finish with. One tool or resource that you love, Leigh. What are you loving at the minute?
So for me, it's a collection. So it's always having sensory resources available. So when I was doing more speech and language therapy, I always had sensory equipment in the room. So I have a swing from my ceiling, I have balance boards, wobble boards, I have resistance bands in the chair. We've got like little things for children to fidget with if they need to. So for me, I think sensory resources are so important, because actually if someone is dysregulated, the connection and the communication are gone.
And just having them readily available, isn't it? Like, again, it's back to that conversation at the start. So I don't have to like walk out of a room, down a corridor, past 4 classrooms, and then I've got the equipment.
Or I don't have to ask for it, even like kind of, here's my card.
Oh, don't get me started.
That's not okay. Well, it might be okay for some people, but that's not okay for everybody.
No, and it's really hard to like say this is what or identify. That's back what you're saying, that you're really trying to help with, of identifying that need.
Yes.
But that's a hard thing to do.
It is.
So sensory resources readily available. We love that. A mindset that helps you.
Yeah, so I have spent a lot of time working in schools. So I think that kind of idea of growth mindset has really helped me. So listening so much to the autistic community and what they are saying, and whenever the community say, actually, for argument's sake, social skills, this harms us, this is not a positive intervention, that we stop doing it, that we listen and that we improve. And I think I used to be quite disappointed in myself, and I was like, oh my goodness, I used to do social skills, and I would have tried to explain it or excuse it, or I was just inexperienced, whereas now I just say, do you know what, I've learned something different, I've learned something new, and I no longer offer that as a service.
Brilliant. But again, that comes back, and I think Jude and I were talking about this, of that defensive thing.
Yes.
You have to set it down sometimes and be like, you know what, I'm really glad you've taught me that.
Yes.
And now we don't do
Yes.
that anymore. And that's okay.
And growth mindset is great as well, like, you know, personally and
Yes.
for our business as well.
Right,
You know,
yeah.
I am quite a defensive person and I can be quite resistant.
Yeah.
But actually allowing yourself to be open to that has been really helpful.
Yeah, great. I love that. And to close then, one piece of advice.
So I'm not sure if this is actually advice, but it's definitely something that's become a little bit of a motto for us at Insight Clinic.
Yeah.
So it is that two things can be true. And we use that a lot when we are talking to parents.
Things can be true.
So parents will often be quite critical about themselves, you know, like, I've done everything, I've tried everything, I don't know what to do, and things are still really difficult for my young person. But both of those things can be true, actually. And when you look at things like that, you're kind of taking away that all or nothing. It has to be this or it has to be this. All those unrealistic expectations can start to fall away, and you can be a wee bit more compassionate and a wee bit more understanding.
Yeah, both things can be true. Two things can be true.
Two things can be true. In fact, there was something when I was listening to your and Jude's podcast, and in my head I was going, well, both of those things can be true.
Both of those things are true at the same time. You know, you're like, that's great. I really, really like that. Leigh, thank you so much. Honestly, there's, again, a wealth of knowledge in there. I hope that people listening, there's like one little thing that just encourages you, inspires you, sparks an idea, and just really reminds you you're not alone. And that's massively important, and really helping you on this journey and helping understanding. So if you hear some of those unhelpful comments, now you're equipped to respond in a way that is helpful. Leigh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.